What if the one thing a man spent years running from was the only thing that could save him? The thundering hooves of a lone chestnut stallion kicked up dust across the open land of the Arizona Territory, 1875. The horse and rider moved like a single shadow stretched across the desert floor, the sunset burning behind them in shades of fire. Rhett Turner had ridden this way for almost 7 years, silent except for the wind and the far-off cries of coyotes. He kept no company, made no promises, and avoided every road that led back toward people. At 34, Rhett carried the look of a man shaped by hard years. His jaw was strong, his face sun-darkened, and his eyes carried the quiet weight of someone who had seen too much of the world's cruelty. The war had taken the best pieces of him and left behind a man who preferred empty horizons to crowded towns. He rode because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and those were things he refused to face. But that evening, as the sun slid low and the land cooled, something unusual caught his eye. Down in a small valley sat a covered wagon, leaning to one side, its wheel shattered like a broken bone. The canvas top fluttered gently in the growing breeze. At first, Rhett's instinct was simple: ride around it. Trouble was best ignored. People meant questions. Questions meant opening doors he'd long kept closed. He tightened his grip on the reins. "Come on, Maverick," he muttered to his stallion. "We're not stopping." But the horse stopped anyway. Maverick snorted, stamped his hoof, and turned stubbornly toward the wagon. Rhett frowned. The stallion had never argued with him before. "Fine," he said under his breath. "We'll look, but we ain't staying." As he guided Maverick down the slope, he saw her. A young woman sat on an overturned crate beside the broken wagon, head in her hands. Her dark blonde hair hung loose from what had once been a neat arrangement. Her dress was wrinkled and dusty, her posture drooped with exhaustion. When she finally lifted her head at the sound of hooves, Rhett saw eyes the color of green glass rimmed red from crying. She reached for something beside her. A rifle. Rhett lifted both hands to show he meant no harm as he stopped about 20 feet away. "Ma'am," he called gently, "looks like you've hit some trouble." She drew a shaky breath but kept her back straight. "That's one way to say it, sir. My wheel's broken, my mule ran off, and I was just deciding if I should start walking toward Colton or sit here and accept my fate." Rhett felt the corner of his mouth twitch. She had spirit, more than he expected from someone stranded alone. "Colton's a long walk," he said as he swung down from Maverick. "Name's Rhett Turner." She hesitated, studying him. "Eliza Miller," she said at last. "I'm heading to my brother's homestead near Colton. He's expecting me in a few days. He won't come looking until long after I'm dry as old leather." Rhett walked closer, careful not to alarm her, and examined the wagon wheel. The spokes were shattered. It couldn't be fixed out here. He glanced inside the wagon and saw trunks, furniture, and supplies. Someone's whole life packed into wooden boxes. "You traveling alone?" he asked. "Mrs. Miller," she corrected quietly. "My husband died last winter in St. Louis. Pneumonia." He didn't miss the tightness in her voice. Rhett nodded. Loss was something he knew like an old scar. "Well, Mrs. Miller," he said, standing again, "you've got 3 choices. You can wait here and pray someone else comes by, though this isn't a busy trail. You can start walking, which I don't recommend. Or—" He paused, unsure why he was about to offer something he never offered. "I can help get you to Colton." Her green eyes studied him, searching for the reason behind his offer. "You don't know me," she said softly. "Why would you help?" Rhett looked at her, really looked at her. Alone in the desert, no mule, no wheel, no chance of making it out safe. "Because leaving you out here ain't something I could ride away from," he said simply. A flicker of relief crossed her face, mixed with pride. "I can pay you," she insisted. "Not necessary. I don't take charity, Mr. Turner." He recognized the stubbornness. He carried plenty of it himself. "We'll talk about that later," he said. "Let's make camp before we lose the light." Eliza hesitated but nodded. Rhett built a fire the way he had 1,000 times before, gathering brush, striking flint, and coaxing sparks into flame. But tonight felt different. There was someone else beside him, someone who didn't fill the silence with needless talk, someone who sat with her knees tucked close, watching the fire with tired but steady eyes. They shared a simple meal, jerky, hard bread, a little coffee. The stars came out bright and sharp, filling the sky like scattered diamonds. Rhett found himself glancing at her more than he wanted to admit. Her hands were working hands. Her voice strong, her courage undeniable. She wasn't helpless, she was simply alone. "Your brother," Rhett said finally. "What's his name?" "Samuel Miller," she answered. "He came west after the war, worked hard, built a life. He wants me to stay with him until I can decide what comes next." Rhett nodded, hearing something familiar in her story. The West was full of people trying to outrun old memories. "And you?" she asked softly. "What are you running from?" Rhett stared at the fire, its flames flickering across his weathered face. "Nothing I care to share," he said. She didn't push. She only nodded, understanding that some wounds were too deep to touch. When it came time to sleep, he lay on one side of the fire while she settled on the other. "I'm a light sleeper," he said. "If anything comes near, I'll wake." "Thank you," she whispered. As he lay staring at the stars, Rhett Turner felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not loneliness. Awareness. Awareness of the woman on the other side of the fire. Awareness of her soft breaths. Awareness that something had shifted inside him the moment he saw her broken wagon. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing for certain. For the first time in 7 long years, Rhett Turner didn't want to ride away. Rhett woke before sunrise, just as he always did. The desert sky was still dark, painted with the last fading stars. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and the air held a sharp morning chill. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake Eliza. She slept, curled on her side, her face soft in the quiet light, her blanket pulled up against the cold. For a long moment, Rhett just watched her. He didn't understand why. He'd seen plenty of travelers, plenty of faces, plenty of strangers passing through dusty towns. But something about this woman pulled at him in a way he didn't want to name. She stirred then, blinking herself awake, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied. He handed her a tin cup of warm coffee. She accepted it with both hands. "You wake early." "Old habit." She sipped the coffee, her fingers shaking a little from the cold. "What's the plan for today?" Rhett stood and looked over her broken wagon. The sun tipped the horizon, washing the land in pale gold. "We make a travois," he said. "Use Maverick to pull your essentials. Leave the heavy stuff behind. Come back for it with your brother once we know you're safe." Eliza nodded. "I trust your judgment." He hadn't expected that. Trust wasn't something people usually gave him, especially strangers. By mid-morning, they had taken apart the broken wagon wheel and salvaged what they could. Rhett worked with sharp focus, tying ropes, fitting planks, adjusting weight. Eliza worked beside him, handing tools before he even asked, moving with quiet strength that impressed him more with every passing hour. When everything was ready, Rhett wiped sweat from his brow. "All right, let's get moving." The desert heat grew quickly. After an hour walking, Eliza's pace slowed. She tried to hide it, but Rhett noticed. Her face flushed, steps heavy, breath short. "Ride for a while," he said, stopping Maverick. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said gently, "and we'll make better time with you resting." She hesitated, then accepted his help, climbing onto Maverick. Her dress brushed his arm as she settled in the saddle. The small contact jolted through him like a spark. He forced himself to focus on the trail ahead. They walked in silence for a while, Maverick dragging the travois behind them. "How long were you married?" Rhett asked, breaking the quiet. 4 years, she answered. "Edward was a doctor, kind, gentle. He worked himself, sick, taking care of others." Rhett nodded. "Sorry for your loss." "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "And you? You mentioned the war." "Union cavalry," Rhett replied. "8th Illinois." She looked down at him from the saddle. "Did it change you?" Rhett breathed out slowly. It changes every man who sees it." He didn't say more. Eliza didn't push. When the midday sun grew too strong, Rhett found a rocky alcove for shade. Eliza sat in the cool sand, leaning against the rock wall. She drank from her canteen and rested her head back with a quiet sigh. "You don't have to stay with me all the way," she said after a moment. "You've already done more than enough." Rhett studied her, taking in the tired eyes and sunburned cheeks, the bravery that never slipped from her voice even when fear crept through the edges. "I'm not leaving you out here," he said. "Not a chance." Her eyes softened in a way that made his chest tighten. When the worst of the heat passed, they continued through the foothills. The land shifted from harsh desert to scattered trees and distant green valleys. As evening arrived, they reached a small trading post. The owner, an older man with a gruff voice, gave them one cabin. Eliza stepped forward before Rhett could speak. "He'll sleep in the barn," she said quickly. "I'll take the cabin." Rhett almost smiled at her insistence on propriety. "Fine by me." After tending to Maverick, Rhett met Eliza in the trading post's dining room. She looked a little cleaner, her hair smoothed, her face refreshed. She sat across from him at a small wooden table, the glow of a lantern soft on her features. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Real food, a real roof." "Doesn't take much to feel like luxury after the open trail," Rhett replied. They ate in gentle silence until Eliza finally spoke again. "Do you ever think about settling somewhere?" she asked. Rhett stiffened. "No." She tilted her head. "Never?" "Never saw the point," he said. "You build something. You lose it. You love someone, you lose them too. Easier not to attach yourself to anything." Eliza looked at him, not with judgment, but with understanding. "That sounds lonely." The truth hit harder than Rhett wanted it to. Later, outside on the cabin porch, she stood by the railing while he leaned against a post. The stars stretched across the sky. The night felt quiet, peaceful. "You think we'll reach Colton tomorrow?" she asked. "We will," he said. "I'll get you to your brother." A small pause settled between them. "I'm glad you came along when you did," she whispered. Rhett swallowed, feeling something deep inside him shift. He wasn't sure what it meant. He only knew one thing. He wasn't ready to leave her. Not yet. The sun rose bright over the valley as Rhett and Eliza left the trading post. The air was cool, the sky washed in soft morning colors, and the land ahead stretched wide and green. They followed the river much of the way, the sound of water mixing with the steady rhythm of Maverick's steps. Eliza rode for the first hour, her back straight, her eyes filled with quiet hope. Rhett walked beside the horse, guiding them through narrow trails and open paths he remembered from long years of drifting. He glanced up at her now and then, noticing how much stronger she looked today. The rest had done her good. By midday, they saw smoke rising from chimneys in the distance, then fences, then open fields, and finally the wooden houses of Colton spread across the valley like a promise. "There it is," Rhett said. Eliza's breath caught. "Home." Her voice shook, but in a way that warmed him. As they passed the first farms, people looked their way. Some nodded, some stared. It wasn't every day a man walked into town leading a horse dragging a travois and a young widow riding beside him. But Rhett ignored the looks. His focus was on the road ahead. They reached a stand of cottonwood trees, and Eliza pointed toward a small cabin set near the river. Smoke curled gently from its chimney. A neat fence circled the yard. "That's Samuel's place," she whispered. "That has to be it." Before Rhett could speak, the cabin door burst open. A tall man with sandy hair rushed out, stopping halfway across the yard as if afraid to believe his eyes. "Eliza!" he shouted. "Sam!" she cried, sliding off Maverick before he had fully stopped. She ran to her brother. He caught her in a tight embrace that lifted her off her feet. Her tears soaked his shoulder, and his voice shook when he spoke. "You're here," Samuel breathed. "You're finally here." Rhett stayed back, giving them their moment. Something inside him twisted, a feeling he couldn't name. He'd forgotten what family looked like, what it felt like. When Eliza drew back, wiping her face, she waved Rhett over. "Sam, "This is Rhett Turner," she said. "He found me when my wagon broke. I wouldn't be here if not for him." Samuel stepped forward and shook Rhett's hand firmly. "I can't thank you enough," he said. "My sister is all I've got." Rhett nodded awkwardly. "Just did what needed doing." "Nonsense," Samuel said. Most men would have ridden on. "You stayed. That matters." Quote. Eliza smiled at Rhett then, a soft, grateful smile that made something warm settle deep in his chest. Inside the cabin, Samuel insisted they sit and rest while he heated stew on the stove. Eliza moved around the small home with ease, touching familiar things, admiring what her brother had built. Rhett watched her quietly, noticing every peaceful breath, every smile, every gentle look she gave the place she would now call home. But the more he watched her, the heavier his heart grew. His time with her was ending. After lunch, Samuel clapped Rhett on the shoulder. "You'll stay the night, of course. Then tomorrow we'll go back for the rest of Eliza's things." Rhett swallowed. Staying felt dangerous. Too easy, too right, but leaving felt worse. "I'll stay," he said finally. That night, after Samuel went to bed, Rhett stepped outside to get air. The moon hung low over the river. The night was quiet, except for the soft rustle of leaves. Eliza joined him after a moment, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Rhett said, though he didn't feel steady at all. They stood side by side, listening to the river. "I don't know what your plans are," she said gently, "but I want you to know something." Rhett looked at her, waiting. "You don't always have to ride away." His heart stumbled. "Sometimes staying takes more strength," she said quietly. "And sometimes staying is the right thing." Rhett didn't answer. Couldn't. Something rose in his chest that he didn't have words for. The next morning, they traveled back with Samuel to retrieve what they had left behind. On the journey, Samuel talked easily, but Rhett felt Eliza's eyes on him more than once. Each glance stirred the unease and the hope fighting inside him. Back at the broken wagon, as they loaded the last of Eliza's belongings onto Samuel's wagon, Samuel said, "You know, Rhett Colton's always looking for good men, builders, riders, protectors. Lot of opportunity here." Rhett didn't reply, but he heard the meaning behind the words. And he thought about Eliza standing in the yard of her new home, sunlight in her hair, hope in her eyes. That afternoon, when they returned to the homestead and unloaded everything, the air felt different. Warmer. Expectant. Eliza approached him when Samuel stepped inside. "You said you'd get me to my brother," she said softly, "and you did." Rhett nodded. "Yeah." "And now you'll be heading out again," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "Reckon I should," he said. "Been riding alone a long time. Hard to change that." She looked down, then lifted her eyes to his. There was sadness there, and something deeper. "You could change it," she whispered, "if you wanted to." Rhett felt something inside him crack open. For 7 years, he'd lived with walls around his heart. Walls built from loss, regret, and miles of empty road. Now, standing in front of her, those walls felt thin. "Eliza," he began, but she took a step closer, her voice trembling. "You don't have to give me an answer now. I just want you to think about what your life could be. Not what it has been, what it could be." Rhett swallowed hard. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. Leaving felt wrong. Staying felt right. He looked into her green eyes, shining in the afternoon light, and he knew he couldn't walk away from this. Not anymore. "I'll stay," he said quietly. "At least for a while." Her breath hitched, and in that moment, hope took root, not just for her, but for him too.